I got a little history here of Monsanto that I want to read off here, just kind of some of the stuff they've done. First of all, the name Monsanto, it comes from this family that were really into the slave trade that settled in the United States in the New Orleans area. And they had plantation in New Orleans. They had a plantation in Mississippi. They owned over 50 slaves themselves, and they were into the slave trade market, buying and selling slaves with the other plantations in the area. And the Monsanto company was then started by some guy that married one of the daughters of this Monsanto bloodline family. And he started it in 1901 in St. Louis, and they started with food additives. And then in the 1920s, they started making these PCBs, which were these highly toxic chemicals that were used in electronics. Those were making a lot of people sick, so those are now banned. They made the DDT in the 1940s for malaria. And I don't know if you've seen those old pictures of them just like spraying rows of children with this DDT. Yeah. And obviously that practice got banned too for hurting people. In the 1940s, they were also part of the Manhattan Project, developing the first nuclear bomb, which is pretty interesting too, that they got a hand in that, all kinds of destruction. In the 60s and 70s, they produced Agent Orange for the U.S. military to use in the Vietnam War and do what they called herbal warfare, where they would just spray this Agent Orange across villages, killing the vegetation there, killing the crops to kind of starve the people out, killing the vegetation so they wouldn't have cover for combat, and then obviously doing all kind of damage to the innocent people living there. And that gave millions of people cancer, by the way. So it was giving cancer to veterans as well as the native population there. In the 1970s, when they first introduced the glyphosate, the Roundup, in the 1980s, they came out with the first genetically modified plant cell. And then 5 years later, in the later 80s, they started testing the first genetically modified crops. And then the 90s is when we really started seeing these crops pop up around Nebraska and stuff. And so in the 90s, Monsanto, they purchased DeKalb, they purchased Cargill's International Seed Business, they purchased Calgene, which was a GMO company in California. And then in 2005, they purchased Seminis. They were a leading global vegetable and fruit seed company. And so that made them the world's largest seed company at that point. And then in 2016, they sold to Bayer for $66 billion. Interesting number that we see pop up a lot. 2019, there were more than 42,000 plaintiffs who said glyphosate herbicides caused their cancer. And in 2020, Bayer pays out $9.6 billion to settle tens of thousands of claims alluding that Roundup caused their cancer.